Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest Lunch and Learn from AMPIA. My name is Jenny Steele. I'm a producer here in Calgary, and I'm so excited to be your host and moderator today. Now, before we get started, we wish to acknowledge the traditional homelands of the Indigenous peoples of this land, including the nations of Treaty 6, 7, and 8, and the Métis Nation of Alberta. We are grateful to work, live, and create upon this territory. As the original storytellers and keepers of this land, we have much to learn from the First Nation and Métis people. Now, today we gratefully welcome Adam Scorgie from Scorgee Productions. A father of three, a loving husband, and an acclaimed documentarian, Adam has an astonishing ability to balance his relentless work schedule and his invaluable family time. What started out as three guys in a basement suite in 2005 has proudly grown into an international award-winning production company with a diverse and multi-talented team that knows exactly what it takes to grow from the basement up. From the Hall of Fame careers of world-class athletes to the shifting global politics of social issues, Scorgee prides themselves in creative and compelling documentary filmmaking that is made with you, the viewer, in mind. To date, Adam has produced 10 feature films, with 2 currently in production and post-production, including Bisping, an in-depth look at the life of UFC legend Michael Bisping, and Breaking Olympia, which partnered with Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson and $7 Bucks Productions. We are so excited to have Adam joining us today. Now, before we begin, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping notes to explain how the Lunch and Learn will work. At regular intervals over the next hour, Adam will answer questions as they come in, so we don't run out of time at the very end. Remember to write your questions in the comments bar to the right so that we can see them and that we make sure we address them all. And we also encourage you to be very active in this chat because that's how we know who's attending. We want to thank Alberta Film, the Edmonton Arts Council, and Telefilm for helping us put on this webinar and for supporting professional development in our province. Okay, now onto the exciting part. If you're an AMPIA member, please email Bill Evans directly at bevans@ampia.org with your name or company name to be entered in the draw for a $500 AMPIA Development Funds Award. Woohoo! And be sure to stick around till the end of the webinar because you need to be online to accept your prize if your name is drawn. However, I should mention if you have won this prize in the past, you won't be eligible for the prize this time. We will be hosting a lot more events like this throughout the year, so if you're not already an AMPIA member, now is definitely the time to become one. Now, before we meet Adam, we'd like to give you a feel for his work, so we're now going to play the trailer for his newest doc called Inmate Number 1, The Rise of Danny Trejo.
All right, fellas, let's do this. My name's Danny Trejo. You might have seen me once in a while.
Desperado, Heat,
Dusk Till Dawn,
Con Air,
Machete.
They make movies and stories about guys like Danny. Danny is that guy.
Danny was in a high-stakes world from a very young age.
Did the heroin since he was 12.
He was just a kid caught up in the game.
I had a sawed-off shotgun and a hand grenade. I buried him, and I told my mom, be real careful in the backyard.
This is a guy who's seen death just to get to 16 years old.
It's like the Wild West.
You're gonna be a criminal. Be a criminal 24 hours a day. Wow.
His name rang through every prison. They knew he was coming. They always knew he was coming.
I'm gonna be top predator no matter what. It's clear they're gonna kill me. I made a promise to myself, start trying to do good. I became a drug counselor.
An opportunity to help somebody one night got him into his first movie.
My career took off immediately. The first 5 years, I just played inmate number 1.
Cholo number 1.
Essay number 1.
Number 10.
Eddie Bunker, screenwriter, goes, "You're Danny Trejo."
He says, one of the movies that people are afraid of you. I wanted to say, why me?
Quinn and I were coming up with a bunch of fake trailers. I said, I got a fake trailer. It's Machete.
It changed the paradigm of who could be a leading man.
Everything good that has happened to me has happened as a direct result of helping someone else. Everything.
It's the idea that I can evolve.
That's Danny's life.
So good. I didn't want it to end. Okay, let's finally meet the man behind it all. Adam, please come onto the screen. We're so excited to meet you. Adam, thanks so much for joining us today. How's it going?
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks so much for having me on, and thank you for the amazing introduction. Makes me bigger and grander than I feel I am, so it's awesome. Thank you very much.
Oh, we're so excited to have you. Okay, let's get right into it. So we'd love to hear you talk a bit about yourself. You know, you've been in the film and TV industry for over 15 years. Can you tell us how you got your start?
Yeah, I started, I went out to New York originally. I used to have my green card and I started in front of the camera. I wasn't very good. I was much better. I found that connecting dots and putting things together and finding ways to get things done kind of clicked for me. So producing became my thing. And then when I moved back to Canada is when we started the union, the Business Behind Getting High. And that was because marijuana and BC Bud had become this global thing. So this was right when Super Size Me and everything was getting super popular and docs were becoming much more mainstream. So I thought, you know, taking what I'd learned in New York, I'm like, oh, I had this bright idea. I'll just make a documentary and it'll be awesome. It'll be easy. And then I get back to acting. And then 4 years later, the doc finally was done and released. And fortunately it became this cult classic. And it really, I've talked about this moment before. What solidified for me is when we were doing the Vancouver premiere and it was completely sold out. There wasn't an empty seat. And I saw people really being moved and reacting where people were crying and laughing. And I remember being like, wow, I'm never going to be able to do anything else. Right. Seeing the way it was affecting an audience. And then, you know, that film and its predecessor end up, you know, playing a small part in Canada's legalization. So you could actually see docs, you know, helping to create change. So, and from there I was hooked. Then I just had to figure out how to make it a business and not a hobby. And that's the challenging part, that I'm always willing to come on things like this to try to help other people, hopefully not make the same mistakes I made.
And that's what we're all here to hear, all your secrets. We're hoping that you share them all.
Share them all.
Yeah. All right, now let's talk about the trailer for Inmate Number 1. Can you walk us through step by step how this doc came to be? Because you mentioned earlier that this one was a bit more of a risk for you.
Yeah, so this one came to be because we just finished Ice Guardians, which is all about hockey enforcers and fighting in the NHL. And my producing partner, Rocky Medalliar, he was working on a movie in just outside of Salt Lake in Utah with Danny called Cartel 2045. And he's like, Adam, you're the doc guy. Like, you should do something on Danny. And at the time, I only knew Danny kind of like most people. I just knew the face, right? I'm like, I'd seen him in Blood In and Blood Out and stuff like that. And I was kind of like, well, to be a really compelling doc, you need to be more than just an actor, right? So I was like, I don't know how, you know, I looked. But then when you find out his real story, like of, you know, doing heroin from the time he was 12 years old to surviving prison to like becoming arguably the most successful Mexican-American actor in Hollywood history, it really changed where I was like, okay, this not only can be a great doc, this could actually have an award-won potential. So, you know, but we had never done just a strict bio doc. And because Danny was a bigger name and dealing with Hollywood agents and everything and the egos and attitudes of Hollywood, we had to take a bigger risk because we wanted to control it, right? I had pre-sales and stuff right in place, but they would have taken everything and made it to where, you know, we'd have less control. So I banked on it and I went to some private investors I work with all the time. And I said, look, and, you know, we showed them the pitch deck, which was amazing, which we'll talk about pitch deck materials, right? And people were like, hey, yeah, we're in. And we took a bit bigger risk or bigger gap, a financial gap than we normally take, but we thought it all paid off because we ended up landing it with, you know, Universal Studios, something that I think only a handful of Canadian documentary filmmakers have ever landed, is a studio deal and acquisition after it's done. So it worked out. It was a calculated plan, but it was a bigger risk. But that risk has now been one of the best investments my team and I have ever done, because now, like, when people watch Danny's, like, it seems like everybody's coming to us now being like, well, we want ours done now.
Absolutely. Oh, that's so incredible. I love that. Okay, now, where do your ideas come from? Like, how do you feel confident that your concept will be a good business idea to move forward?
So, you know, I don't know if there's any right way to do this. For me, obviously, when we started, I'll go back to the union. The marijuana argument was a big thing. It was always in the papers. You were always seeing articles about grow ops and everything else. So it seemed timely. And then same with Ice Guardians. Like, it was always talking about concussions were a big thing, fighting in hockey, you know, the removal of these kind of players in this type of game. So they were political, like they were always there. And then, you know, first and foremost, there has to be a passion to tell the story, because any film project, factual or scripted, is so hard to put together that if you don't have passion, you'll fade really quick. So combination of both with those was politically driven, always in the media. So the attention seems to be there. And then, you know, having a passion for it. I knew a lot of guys that were tough guys in the NHL. So it was something I really was interested in covering. Didn't know much about marijuana, but like, as the film says, you know, learning about it quickly becomes the most addictive part. And then with Danny, I just thought, you know, everybody loves, you that triumph over tragedy story of someone overcoming adversity, because that's something we can all more connect to. Maybe it's not as grand as Danny's story, but we all feel at times, we're not born in the monarchy and from royal families, that we grind and get there. So all those different things. And then something on a business side, what I look for, other than the story being great and being passionate about the subject matter, is nowadays it's a lot of social media stuff, right? Like, with Danny, he had a huge social media presence and it showed that a lot of people followed his stuff, and that no matter how many movies Danny does, and let's be honest, a lot of them are, we'll be kind to say they're B movies, right? But he doesn't care. When you watch the doc, he doesn't care because he's happy and blessed to be working. People just love him because they love the story that he had. So I usually look at all those components. And from the business side, when you are selling to broadcasters and distributors, you got to remember they don't really care like if the story's good, or like, they're business people. They're like, how much do we spend and what's the reward for us? That is what they look at. So biggest thing that filmmakers, we all do all the time, is we get so passionate about it and we think it's the greatest project in the world, and we're like, this has got to be done, but you have to sell to them on what they want, right? So do your research on who you're going to, because you could spill all this passion and commitment and people are like, yeah, we don't do that kind of stuff. So that's cool that you're passionate about it, but that's not going to work for us. Mm-hmm. And I had a sales background for years before I made making films my main job, right? When I was working 2 to 3 jobs and film was like a side job or a hobby. So I definitely use those skills tactics of finding what the business motives and buying objectives are of the people that I'm going to, right? What works for them. It has to be a win for them, and it has to be a win after it releases. Otherwise they go back. If it just airs and nobody watches it, good luck on going back there the next time, right? Because the broadcaster will be like, well, your last project was a bomb for us. We're not really looking to go in again. Even if the subject matter is different, that's a big hurdle to overcome. Yeah. So I kind of look at those and think that if, I have a story like Danny's that I think can work, and, find a director that, really loves the story and really thinks he can tell it. And then I take that business idea to the people I work with, primarily a lot right here out of Alberta. That's why I moved, is because Super Channel's right here and I can go knock on their door all the time. Yeah. So it's doing your due diligence before you approach the client. Big time. I think it's the biggest thing as a producer that I've realized, and that just we do in the film industry, because we're so excited and we get passionate about these stories and we're inspired by film, and because it's a flashy industry when things are going good, not when they're not going good, but we kind of forget the business aspects, right? Like if you were to go into any bank, they're going to want a truckload of paperwork to explain, like, okay, you want money, show us your return on investment, show us how long the money's tied up, what is all this. Mm-hmm. You need to have the same for your films, right? And I'm always blown away when producers don't have that. Like, you have to. Otherwise, when you're trying to ask people for money, it looks like you don't know what you're doing. Yes. Okay. We're going to touch on the business and financial aspects later for sure. We're going to go back to the Inmate #1 trailer. Connie's asking, how did you get Canadian funding for Inmate #1 when it was an American story? Because documentaries, as long as it's owned and controlled and the key creative crews are Canadian that are producing it, you qualify for all the Canadian. That's the great thing about the CMF and everybody else. And that's actually why Canada, we go to bat when it comes to documentaries with the rest of the world, is because of the way our funding models work, we're able to do that, right? As long as the key creatives are Canadian and you don't have any American producers, you qualify in CAFCO, CMF, and we're an 8 out of 8 on our CAFCO certification for Inmate. Awesome. All right. Okay. Now let's say you have an idea. What assets do you need to sell that idea to the broadcaster? Are there any best practices when it comes to writing or writing a treatment or a synopsis? So this is where, at this point is where I usually engage a director to do this, because again, there has to be passion. So I find a director. There's several that I work with. Brett Harvey directed Inmate. He also did Ice Guardians, Culture High, and The Union. Like we kind of built our brands together, the two of us, but I usually go to him first and I see if he's interested, and then we design a pitch book. So for a script, if you're doing scripted stuff, would be having a great script. No great movie or even good movie is made without a great script first. So for docs, it's having an excellent treatment, right? Or a pitch book. That's kind of our treatment. It has the synopsis, it has the outline, it has the visual look, it has the imagery that you're going to use. It gives buyers a sense of what the feel and tone of the film is going to be. Now, when we do these, I don't rush these. Like, we spend usually about a month in design and the writing work. That, presentation is everything. So back in the day when you would meet in person and you'd put one of these pitch books, we get them done in an Apple. I'm trying to see if I have one in my office. we'd get them done on one of those Apple like coffee table books. So when you're first pulling them out, people are like, whoa, are you giving us a laptop? I'm like, hold on, I'm not that successful filmmaker. It's a pitch book, right? and pull it out. But just when they're turning the pages, they're like, wow, they get the presentation, the style you've used, it catches their attention. And then when it sits on their desk, it stands out from the hundreds of others that are there. So we always go with that. Yeah, this is the one for Breaking Olympia that, we're doing on Phil Heath that ultimately got the Rocks company attached to co-produce with us, is that the pitch book was, beautifully designed and almost looks like oftentimes when they're sitting in my office, people think it's just something that we, oh, did you get this at Barnes and Noble? Is this a coffee table book? Like, no, it's a pitch deck. And I can't stress enough that if you rush and put your pitch materials together, like distributors see hundreds of them every week from everybody from, Adam Sandler and Keanu Reeves to indie guys like us. So your pitch material better be damn excellent. Otherwise it will not get attention. So we always put a lot into that. And that's normally where we get our financing from there. And then if they're interested and they're looking at what our budget is and everything, then I don't usually bring more than a financial structure to start to kind of see what they want. And then when they start saying, okay, we're interested, then I put those other pieces together.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so Julie's asking then, so before we try to sell a story, we need a script, yes?
Not a script. So if you're doing dramatic, Julie, then yes, a script. And you need a good script, right? And normally I'm not good at dramatic stuff. Every time I've gone into that space, I've not done well. But like a good script usually seems to be like 6 to 8 drafts before it's good, right? It isn't you write your first draft and someone does a brief polish and touch up and it's ready. Not my experience. I'm sure there's some out there, but every script I know has been like, it's usually on the 8 to 10 mark that it's ready. But yeah, for docs, we do a pitch deck. I'm trying to see if I actually had a physical one I could show in my office. I think they're all gone, but that is our script for factual, because a lot with docs, we can't script. We don't know what's going to happen right in the contemporary story. Like with Breaking Olympia just showed, Phil Heath, he just competed for his last Olympia, which if he would have won, he would have tied Ronnie Coleman and Lee Haney with 8 Mr. Olympia titles, something only 3 people on the planet have ever accomplished. There's only ever been 16 people to hold that trophy in the world ever since its 60-year existence. So for majority of them to only be owned by a few guys, he's already on the Mount Rushmore of bodybuilders with Arnold and everybody else, but he would have been tied for the greatest of all times, but he didn't win. He came 3rd. So we can't script that kind of stuff. So you put the pitch deck helps you flush out your idea, obviously, and the treatment is almost in there. We do it separate, but because the pitch deck itself is to pitch the broadcasters and you're selling the sizzle more. But then the treatment that you do in the outline is more for you flushing what those parts of the story are. But with docs, you can't push a narrative. Like it's going to grow as you go along. So you kind of script your areas like these are the interviewees, these are the areas and places we hope to cover. And here's what ultimately, the overarching story is. But a lot of the times it changes. With Danny, it changed a lot. A lot was going on contemporary. And we originally wanted to go back to San Quentin, and we even got a letter from the governor of California, but they would not let us back in there. So we had to cheat it and go to Phoenix, where he spoke at the prison.
Awesome. All right, Tom Acton. Hi, Tom, by the way. I can see your questions here, and I can tell you we're going to definitely address all of those a bit later in the webinar. So I'll leave those for now. But if I do happen to miss one, Tom, be sure to put it back into the chat. Okay, now another question we've got here is, how did you get Inmate to Universal? So that I got to bring on, I have the best factual sales agent in Canada, no doubt. It's Joe Cardinal at Upstream Flicks. I don't even really like to refer to him as a sales agent. He's more of just my producing partner. He's been doing this for years, and he's worked with the big distributors and stuff for years as an assistant, and he's seen how they've screwed over filmmakers for years. So he really takes care of us. So Jode's a key part of the team. Like right when I have a project, I'm like, Jode, like we're hot on this as far as the creative side. I kind of go to him like, do you think we can sell this? What do you think the market will bear? And he'd be like, oh yeah, man, like we can sell, like you should take a gap of maybe 150,000 or even up to 200,000 Canadian. I'm pretty confident I can sell that and get that back. So it was all Jode. And this is one of the great things when you go to festivals, even when you don't get invited, if everybody wants to feel good, like don't feel bad about getting rejected by festivals. Like I've been rejected by Sundance 10 times. I'm 0 for 10, 0. All the top tier ones like Tribeca, kind of like
I just, when I get the response, I just look and I'm like, oh, unfortunately, there it is. I just never get in. But going to Sundance is, fortunately, my parents have a place there. It's good to go to some of these film markets because just the meetings, and sometimes and Joe had a relationship with Lewis from Universal because he used to work at Thunderbird. Lewis had stepped up and took over Factual, and then we were talking, and originally it was about Bisbing because they'd done the Conor McGregor doc and they loved it, and they were like, hey, like, we really want to see Bisbing. And we're like, well, Bisbing's not going to be done for a year. It's down the road. We're working on it. But we do have this other great one right now, which is Inmate. You should take a look at that. And they're like, sure, we'd love to take a look. And they loved it and came with an offer right away. And it was great because we had a lot of rejections. Like Netflix rejected it without even watching it. And the way we know they didn't watch it is we track every link. When Joe sends it out for buyers, he sends every single buyer an individual link and he names them so we know. So we know Netflix had only watched 1 second, and then they wrote us back and passed, even though they were bugging us for months to see it. So, which it worked out because I think Universal did way better with it then, and it'll probably end up on the streaming services down the road. But the answer to your question is that the short answer is that Joe, my producing partner, and say he's the one that has the real contacts at all the big buying places. I do not. I know most of them. He's welcomed me in, which everybody told him, like, as a sales agent, like, you can't bring the producer because then he'll just screw you and he'll go to them directly. But that's not, I worked under and with too many of those greasy producers in the back that, like, that's why I am transparent about everything. I share budgets. I send financial structures. I share contacts. I don't believe in holding other filmmakers back. It's somehow, if you don't succeed, that somehow I will do better. In fact, I can prove in the last couple of years, there's been 3 films that I've been hired on strictly because I helped these filmmakers early on in their career. They just cold called me or messaged me through social media, and I jumped on the phone having no idea what they were involved in, just to try to help. And they've all, when they got greenlit a few years down the road on a well-financed project, they've all brought me on as a consultant. So, you know, I think hoarding information does nobody any service, right? And you're not, even if you have even if the stories are similar, hey, go to the market and let the best player win. Right? Like, I actually get excited when somebody, because when we approached Danny, there was like, oh, there's apparently another film crew doing it. I'm like, perfect. Let's put our pitch decks side by side and get us in the room and tell us who's better. Right? And our pitch deck was that good that I was ready to be like, get anybody. We'll be better than theirs.
Good for you. Go head to head, right? Yeah. Amazing. Okay, we're getting a lot of questions for the business and financial plan. So let's talk about, can you talk a bit about your business plan? Do you have a financial structure or blueprint that you follow? And I think we'll have a few visuals to pull out.
Yeah, I think Matt's got this here. So, you know, generally the first thing you need in Canada, and there's no reason to not finance your project out of Canada. It makes no sense. Like, even if you can get the American sale first, like, still get the Canadian side to trigger, because then you can use that as soft money to finance yourself. So normally you get your distributor or your broadcaster on first to trigger your, for me, we always get a broadcaster. We have like an output deal with Super Channel. So yeah, so here you go. So you see in the top there is, I think this is our original Inmate budget. The top one is Super Channel, which will trigger your tax credits. And then the distribution MG, which we ended up having, that was a private investor came in. And then CMF is the golden goose in Canada. That is non-recoupable grant money. And for those that don't understand what that term means, I didn't know either, so I'm not trying to sound, is that means you don't pay it back. You do a lot of paperwork that isn't fun, but that is free money. And that's what's really been enticing all these American clients to come to us, is that I'm like, look, I can get a budget of a minimum of $500,000 to up to $750,000, and I can mitigate that budget by a minimum of 60%, sometimes up to 80% with soft money, sometimes 100% if you can hit all the performance envelopes and everything. And then our international sales is gravy. So then I usually go 50-50 with Danny and other people, so that way, if we do land that big sale, there's substantial back end for them as well. So this is where you get down to where you see this. So the CMF license top up, that's a performance envelope that comes out of your broadcasters. They have so much CMF that they can allocate. It's getting tougher and tougher to get these days. And it's weird how they usually allocate it to their big series. And it's annoying as a documentary filmmaker that docu-series, which are some of these reality shows, qualify because they do somehow get under documentary banner, which pisses me off. But they usually eat up a lot of that because you're competing with viewerships as good as these docs have done. You know, Housewives of whatever gets more viewers than they do, unfortunately. So you are competing with them. But knowing when those funding opportunities open and applying for them and getting in, I mean, even if you just get the regional bonus, which used to be better in Alberta because we didn't used to get lumped in with BC. So it used to be virtually untouched if you tapped in May when it first opened. Now it usually gets prorated, but even prorated, you get 15% of your budget in a non-recoupable grants. And usually if even it gets prorated, you'll still get about 10%. So that's the down the line where you see the CMF English Regional Production Incentive, 77,000 we got for that project. And that was just non-recoupable grant money that we get.
Wow.
And then you have your tax credits, right? Your federal and your labor. And you'll see my federal tax credits is light. I always like to go really light because those come so far down the road. They're after you're done the project and you've done your audit, and then you send it to the federal government and they get back to you right away because they're the federal government. So obviously. So I usually like to put the highest grind on those possible, because if there's an extra 10, 20 grand, it's usually 2 years down the road. And that usually just pays for administrative and everything. Always good to put those buffers in place. Always go worst case scenario instead of best case scenario. So then when other things come up, if legal costs more, if you need an extra shoot or production went longer, especially when you're dealing with factual stuff, it can go longer. It's not like a movie where it's like, we have 19 days, we're going to go shoot it here. It's going to be in these locations. Like, you know, for Bisbing, we're in the UK, and then he got inducted to the Hall of Fame. So we went to the Hall of Fame ceremony. So you can't always plan for it all. So it's good to have those buffers in place that when production goes longer, that you can get those additional tax credits to pay bills and stuff down the road.
All right. Okay. So speaking of buffers, I mean, how about budgets? Like, how do you manage your cash flow? Like, how do you support yourself while you're waiting for these tax credits to come in? Well,
that's where, so the good thing is if you have, if you have decent credit, which I did not have for years, so I'm only just starting to get it with my company, the banks will cash flow your tax credits, right? Especially here in Alberta, we have the arts and culture branch at ATB. They are fantastic. They're cheaper than any of the other banks. They will give you a better rate, and they're really easy to work with, and they specialize in these kind of things. But this goes back to what I was talking about earlier, is your paperwork better be correct, because they are still a bank. So they are going to want to see your financials from your sole purpose company. You know, and the easiest way is always with every company, I create a sole purpose company for each one. That way it's easier for the audit with CAVCO and the provincial government, because just what money went in, where it went out, whether it went Alberta spend, labor spend, non-labor spend, is much easier to do than if you're doing several projects from your own company. That gets and then it just bogs it down with CAVCO, because CAVCO, anytime you're running it through your own company, then they may want to do further audits. And it's much easier if you just, you know, and I name them after, like, Inmate was called Inmate Productions, right? Chasing Evil is called Chasing Evil Inc. You run it through there, you do your audit, you run it for a couple of years afterwards, and you shut it down. But I go to the banks for the tax credits, and then I have private investors for the gap and stuff like that. And obviously, my private investors have never lost money. That's a key thing if you're going to go to investors. If you're, you know, a lot of times this is family when we first start, and that's fine. I did that. That's me as one of those people, went to Bank of Dad. But I made sure that Bank of Dad got all his money back plus interest. The only film that my dad lost money on, and it wasn't very much, was The Union. And that's only because we screwed up on our tax credits. I didn't do my tax credits correctly, and I lost $85,000 of tax credits. Wasn't solely my fault. I'd hired a big accounting firm. They have a big building here and in Calgary too. And they screwed up big time. And I sued them. And I won, I guess, for not having to pay my legal bills, but or my accounting bills. But I lost the tax credits. Otherwise, I would have been completely even. So taking care of your investors, that money should go before them. So, and then usually the way is I stagger the cash flows so the interest is different. So the great thing about CMF money is once you're done all that miserable paperwork, it comes back. They give you like 60 to 80% of it right away. They put it into your account. So you cash for that. Once that goes down, then you might want to kick in your interim financing for your tax credits or something else, right? Like, don't get the interest running until you need it, right? Don't just I often have to explain this with partners when they're like, they see the budget, like, cool, we're green lit, so just give me all my money now. And I'm like, no. Goes on a drawdown over months, like kind of like job. You can bill $5,000 now for your writing and then $10,000 for directing down the road. Like we stage it out so that we try to mitigate the interest as long as possible.
Amazing. Okay, Adam, Chad's asking, what percentage or amount of funding is committed before you are rolling?
Oh, 100. I don't know. You can't get CMF funding until you're 100% financed. They won't let you. So you have to have it all either with documents signed. It doesn't have to be in the account, but it has to be like if you have a gap when you submit to the CMF, you have to have your gap solidified with a contract. You have to have your broadcast license to trigger. You have to have your detailed tax credit calculation. You have to have your tax credit opinion letter. You have to submit all that stuff in so that they can see. And what's great is when you do CMF first, all the documents that you need for them are exactly what the banks are looking for. So they'll make you do a cash flow projection over 18 months. You put together that cash flow, the bank's going to ask you for the same thing. You just give them the CMF form. You're like, here you go. So as miserable as doing those funding things are, they really do line up for everything else you need.
Okay.
And if you can, I'll give you're talking to a guy here that like, I couldn't cheat my way through math in high school, right? I was horrible. I was like, I had every teacher saying I was either going to be in jail or in a motorcycle club by the time I was 20. Everybody said I was going to fail. So you don't have to be a whiz at this. If people say, well, I can't do it, that you're just being lazy because it is all laid out. It's not fun. Reading government mandates is never fun, but anybody can figure it out. I still count with my fingers. Like, so there's no way. Like this is business math. It makes sense. If you can't figure out how to navigate the tax credit systems in your province, then producing really shouldn't be your part of the film. Like maybe directing or writing is more your thing because it can be done. I figured out Cavco on my own. I had a few people guide me with CMF and now I'm able to train other people. And I'm, for lack of a better word, like a real dummy when it comes to that stuff. I just don't like to lose. So persistence pushes me to get it done.
Amazing. And thank you for being so honest about all of this. That's so much feedback. Everyone's so happy for you for sharing so much information. They're all saying how inspiring you are. So thank you.
Oh, no, happy to do that.
All right, let's keep trucking along. Now let's talk about pitch decks. I know everybody here would love for you to walk us through the process.
Okay, so I really wish I had one in hand that I could show, but they become collector's pieces, like mementos of what we created. Let me see. So with the pitch deck, right, again, this is when I usually bring the director on at this point that I know is right for the project, right? And I want him to have creative say. So if we have a title, we have kind of what we think we're going to go, I really leave this to the director and I don't micromanage the director, right? And then I show them, even when it's somebody new that maybe hasn't done a pitch book like we've done in the past, then I'll show them our previous ones. Be like, look, whatever you design needs to look like this. And it can't look like a dumbed down version of it or one that you rush through. Like a pitch deck usually takes about a month to do. And I'm not a writer. I don't claim to be, but in the pitch deck, we generally have your synopsis, your brief treatment. For documentaries, we'll have our proposed interview list, which you like never get everybody on there. You get close. So this right here, so you can see like, we didn't get half these people in there. But again, this pitch deck is to sell people to give you money. So you want to put a little pizzazz and flair in there and spice it up like it's going to be bigger than it is. And they understand. And they might ask you like, well, how many of these people have you confirmed? And that's where you can be honest with you. Okay, well, we've confirmed like 4 of them, right? As you see, like we got Robert Rodriguez, Michelle Rodriguez, and I'm looking, there's a lot of big names on here that we didn't get. They understand that, and I haven't had them push too hard on being like, well, how many are going to actually be in? And like any great doc too, like the audience is savvy now too, that you put some of the celebrities on there for flash to entice, the distributor. But at the end, it's like, we usually want a lot more of the people that are like the family members, people that were actually in prison with Danny, like people that can actually contribute to the story. So all those elements are then put into the pitch deck. But again, I usually hire a director or a creative team, and I don't go cheap on this. My pitch decks usually cost between $2,000 to $3,000 to design because it's a ton of research going into them. The artwork and stuff is really good. It's flashy, the presentation, because first presentation's everything. That first image, and that if you don't sell them on it when it first gets in front of them, then that could be the end of it. And in Canada, to trigger financing, there isn't a lot of, we only have like the 4 pillars of broadcasters to trigger stuff. So there isn't a lot of places you can go.
All right. Okay. So we have another question here. How do you go about getting the people for your interviews? I know you joked you didn't get them, but I've seen your films and you get some pretty big names.
Well, that's where I put, as you see in my email, if you've emailed with me back and forth, we put creative hustler. The thing is, you by hook or by crook, you got to find a way. So I usually try the way of path of least resistance, right? So if we've worked with somebody in the past that we know is close to that person, then we might reach out to them and say, hey, you got a good relationship with so-and-so. What's the best way to get a hold of them, right? And at some point, with their really big name, you're probably going to have to go through management at some point, but we do try to avoid agents at all costs. Agents are, I think their acronym, even though I don't know, it means a stall to progress, but, I don't think it's really, but agents are usually a pain in the butt. So unless we have a good relationship with the agent, then we'll try to go through them. But looking, I mean, the great thing is now with the internet, you have IMDb and you have all these research materials where you can go and find them and figure out the path. So I usually try to go with a publicist or manager first, because oftentimes managers have a more personal relationship than the agent does, or a publicist. So a lot of time we'll put the interview request there if we don't have like a more personal connection. I always go personal connections first if you have them, right? Then go through the publicist and manager, and then the agent if you have to, right? And at times it just takes persistence, but like where they don't get back and they'll go, we'll get back to you next week. And then they don't get back and we won't get back to you next week. Like I've literally had like one big interview said, you know what? You've been so polite and so persistent over these last couple of weeks that we agreed we're going to find a time. We're going to get it to work, right? So don't ever be rude in those emails or snarky, no matter, because that like, they're doing you a free interview. They don't have to do shit. A lot of these people could charge huge money for that. So that will get you nowhere, right? Or try to be, I'm this. So when we send the emails, if it's me emailing myself, we don't have a connection and it's someone that we're just going to directly, you know, you'll always name drop, be like, hey, we've been fortunate enough to land secure interviews for this project with so-and-so, so-and-so, so-and-so. If you have a great pitch deck, show them that. If you have a sizzle reel or concept reel, you can send with it. Say, this is it. We'd love to find a time to find, you know, when you can participate with us. Like, you know, our schedule's pretty open. We're willing to travel, although that's getting tougher. Yeah. Some restrictions. And go from there. Something that has started to come over, especially over the last few projects, which has been really cool, is that obviously our work speaks for itself now. A lot of the talent is now coming to us and saying, hey, like, we saw what you did with Danny's and we saw Ice Guardians and Making Cocoa. Like, we want you to do ours. And if their story's bankable, then this is also a lot of times why I partner with the talent rather than just trying to come up with an arbitrary fee to give them, which I do give them fees too. But if they're a partner, then they don't mind reaching out. So for Bisbing, who we've become great friends now, like we're planning family vacations together. He's been one of them. We're the same age and we both have 3 kids and he's just the funnest guy to hang out with. It. He reached out to everybody. Like he was like, oh, well, I've worked with Vin Diesel on XXX. Like, I'll text him. And like a lot of times the talent might not want to do that. Like with Danny wasn't willing to do that. And Danny doesn't really, like, he really doesn't text. So it's not just Machete don't text. He really doesn't like to, the phone he actually uses is a flip phone. He has an iPhone too, but the one that he calls on is an old like flip phone that he pushes the numbers. So he was like, I don't want to call people and ask them. So we had to do that and go through his agent. But with Bisbing, he had no problems reaching out to everybody. He's like, oh, I'll reach out to George St. Pierre. I'll reach out to Mickey Rourke. I'll reach out. So like, that's probably the highest ratio of like what our interview list was. I think we got 90% of them because he reached out to all of them and they were like, sure, for Biz, no problem. When do you want to do it?
And now you might be learning UFC moves on your family holidays.
Oh yeah, well, my son already kills me, so I can't learn much there other than just an avid fan.
Oh, that's so good. I love it. Okay, let's talk a bit about distribution. So can you walk us through the process? When do you start to begin sales and start to distribute your film?
So distribution is an evolving thing because like the world is like, even, you know, since Inmate released, you know, I can't officially know, but we're in negotiations with another studio for Bisbing. It's pretty sure we're going to have another studio deal unless I really screw things up. So now, depending on how you financed it out of Canada, right, you might have already had Canada locked up, right, as far as distribution. You might have brought on E1 or you might have brought on, what's the other one with an M out east, or Super Channel or Bell. If you bring on a broadcaster, then you're only having to navigate the TV rights, right? And if you bring on, like, say, a Bell or Super Channel, then it's only pay TV. So then once you do bring on your international distribution, you can kind of navigate to make sure the rights line up. So normally I don't think too much about distribution until the film is done. You should never send a film, just like a film festival. Don't ever send a rough cut because it just, like, you rarely get in. Like, I've only ever sent a rough cut once and got in, and that's to the lovely Calgary Film Festival because we know them and we've had success with them and they know my work and they knew that we would deliver. But if you're planning to send to a big one, don't send it to a distributor or a film until you're done, like everything done, sound, music, color, legal, like done. Just because like, unless you're Tarantino, or Warner Herzog, you're probably not going to get in. But for distribution, same thing. Wait till you're done, everything's done, legal's cleared, because sometimes you can have a distributor interested, and then when they see it, they're like, okay, you're ready to deliver, and you're like, well, we still got to get money to do this, we're going to shoot this, and that, especially in the factual market, like distributors is like, oh no, like with this one was on the fence as it was, and now that you don't have all that and deliverables are going to be a mess, they're like, not worth it. So we usually work on distribution when it's done. You know, we're always doing research as we're going. Where do we think this would fit? We've usually done our research before we even started. Where do we think this would fit? You know, who's done other docs like it? Were they successful for them? And if we can meet them at film markets or have conversations early on when maybe we have a pitch deck or a sizzle reel and just say, hey, this is coming down the pipe. We can start those, but nobody's going to give you an offer nowadays until the film is done. So usually once it's done is when we start saying, okay, film's now ready, and we start sending it out. So when the film is done, we start reaching out, and then that's when we usually send a trailer and a sizzle reel. And as you guys know, it's tough to even get distributors to watch it because they get so much stuff. So in this one, again, with Bisbing, Bisbing is so cool. He actually made like personalized videos to everybody saying like, hey, HBO, it's that crazy Brit, you know, Michael Bisbing here, former champ, like, hope you dig my documentary. And if you don't, well, I understand. Or if we had a better relationship, he'd come off cheeky and be like, well, if you don't, go fuck yourself, right? Like, so he's a world champ. He could say that. We didn't say that, right? He would say that, but only with relationships we had really good. So we'd send that out and then fish. But, you know, the short answer to the question is we don't wait till the film is done and we want to present, right? And just kind of have your rights in Canada that got you the funding. Just make sure you're cognizant of them all the time. Thankfully, Super Channel, we've done very well with them, where I think on their top 5 most viewed documentaries ever, we have 3 or 4 of them. So if we need to extend deadlines, they're always really great with me. That's why I argued when they had their CRTC thing, like they're instrumental to indie filmmakers. So whenever you deal with the big conglomerates out east, like I've worked with Bell too, but they're very tough. Like you have to shift things. So just whoever finances you, it's the balance is whoever finances you out of Canada and triggers you, you have to be cognizant of what rights they have. Generally, I don't ever sell any rights outside of Canada in the pre-sale, but it's sometimes you might have to get the money you need. And that makes your life easy. If you've already sold the world to E1, well, then you don't really have to worry about it. They're going to handle it whatever way they want. But generally, I like to just try to sell the TV in Canada and then sell the international rights after.
Fantastic. Okay, and everyone, I just want to remind all the attendees, it's almost 1:45. So if you haven't already emailed Bill, please do now at bevans@ampia.org if you want to be entered for the big draw at the end of this webinar. Okay, moving on. Okay, now you mentioned you have a sales agent. How does this work, and when do you get one?
So generally, a sales agent comes on when your film is done and you go to markets and to distribution, and you'll bring on a sales agent. There certainly is a negative connotation with sales agents, and a lot of them I really don't think do filmmakers justice. And that isn't their fault. It's part of the way the industry is now. It's just that a lot of sales agents make their money by putting sheer volume of content onto platforms because, you know, one of the great things about things being digital and easier for filmmakers to make is that it's easier for us to make things. Downside is that there's way more content than we've ever seen before, and you're competing with giant TV shows and series and stuff that have big actors and big marketing pushes. So generally a sales agent, if you don't already know one, you know, is someone that you bring on either at a film market or because they'll have a list of them. For here, local Albertans, Banff is great. There's a lot of them that usually go to the Banff market when it's there. If not, you can literally Google sales agents in Canada and you can find them. Many sales agents will want an upfront fee. That's not unnormal because if you haven't delivered a lot, deliverables are getting more and more challenging as far as legal, you know, what the different platforms want as far as delivery specs and sound stems and everything else. So it's normal that they're going to charge you because, just being honest, like 90% of film projects, probably even higher, 99, don't make money, right? They go on Amazon Prime and hopefully you get viewers because you didn't have money for marketing. You had just enough money to make it. So sales agents have it tough. So they usually bill you up front, and I don't mind that. I just had some people recently send me some sales agent stuff saying, how does this look? And I'm like, it looks pretty standard to me, to be honest. But I have kind of, as my team's built our career, Joe, who I mentioned earlier at Upstream Flicks, you guys can certainly search him out. We've kind of built our companies together. So he's just always kind of built into the team. He's really more of a producer with us than a sales agent now. He's just, you know, from the get-go, he's built in, and now he's in a fortunate enough position where, you know, because he knows it. He's like, hey, Adam, I know you guys are getting big offers from studios and stuff now. So, you know, he even puts up MGs, which is a minimum guarantee to make sure that he solidifies the rights. So we use that for cash flow and everything else, but he's on from day one from us of kind of going through things. He understands the tax credits and stuff very well. And something that we had to do, kind of going back to, I think Connie was the one that asked the question, how do we stay on side, is that for CAVCO, for your federal tax credits, a Canadian distributor has to maintain the rights for 24 months, even if you sell it to a studio. So by having a Canadian sales agent, who they usually qualify as a distributor as well, they were able to make sure that we stayed on side with CAVCO and didn't have to pay back our tax credits, even though we signed a studio deal. So, you know, having a great sales agent, I make no qualm. Like we would not have a career, like my team and I would not have a career without a great sales agent. He's a key part of the cog that, as talented as you are as making films, if you don't have a great person that knows how to sell them, because they are two completely different worlds, you'll be in trouble. And we had, like, our first film, The Union, we make a joke about that, is it sat for 2 years and did film festivals and was winning awards and was getting all this kind of buzz organically. Well, using social media before the algorithms changed, when social media was totally controlled just by the audience. And enough so that when Phase 4, who got bought out by Entertainment One, originally was getting into the market, I have the original email because it's a fun one. They say, I see this having no commercial success, but hopefully you can prove me wrong. I'm looking for content and shelf space. So I'll give you a 65-35 split with no upfront money. And hopefully we can make a couple grand in the back. And I told them, because social media was building up at that time, and I knew, like, we were already hitting to a target audience. I knew, my team knew. And I said, what would be a great goal for you? They're like, oh, if we could sell 10,000 units in the first year, we'd be tickled pink. Well, we sold 35,000 units in the first quarter. So the ongoing joke was that I still owed them a favor, even though it made them a ton of money right out of the gate. So, but that comes as a sales agent relationship. My buddy Nolan Pilek knew the guys that were looking for shelf space and bought it over Barry Merowitz at Phase 4, and it came together. So having a great sales agent, and an ethical one, because there's some greasy ones out there too, is key. And I would start with Jode if you can get him. The one thing I am gonna let you guys know is that he's pretty busy with our projects, and which is what a sales agent should do, though, is they're very selective now, where if they don't have the bandwidth, he'll give you good advice, but just say, look, you know, I have too much. Stay away from a sales agent, like, not to name names, but Gravitas, and these people will come to you and be like, oh, look at all the docs we do. And this is where my sales background comes in. I always grind them when they're like, look, we have these 100 docs. I'm like, well, that means best case scenario, if you're repping 100, best case scenario is I get less than 5% of your time. Like, well, no, it doesn't really work. I'm like, well, that's what you just said to me. You have 100 films that you're representing. Like I'm best case, I'm getting 3-4% of your time. So I'd rather have, you know, someone like Joe, that he's like our right-hand man all the way from beginning of production to the end, guiding us on how to make sure that we sell. But finding a great sales agent or distributor that you know directly is very key.
So better to find the sales agent instead of them finding you.
Yes, because normally when they're finding you, they're kind of doing a mass blast at one of the markets, and then they just have a generic package. And the key thing is, even if the money doesn't look as good, if one really seems passionate about it and they really paid attention to your film, and they really seem like, even if they're not the bigger name, often they can be better, because the bigger name, sometimes you can get lost in the mix. Sometimes the guy that is smaller, that only represents a few, but really loves what you created, guy or girl, sorry, but the sales agent is the one to go with. That's who I've always worked with. Yeah. And now obviously Jode and Netflix is really becoming a staple here in Canada, but he was just an assistant to the distributors and sales agents for many years. So. Wow.
Crazy. Okay, we're going to squeak in one more question before we go to the draw, and then there's a few more questions in the chat that I'll come to once we've done the draw, just so we don't run out of time. Sure. Okay, now, when you secure stars for your projects, are they also brought in as producers, and do the celebrities get creative control? And if so, how do you manage it?
Great question. It's different for every project. There's no one set thing, but the general rule that I tell with all of the talent, because we're negotiating 2 pretty big ones right now, is I don't come up with an arbitrary number because I don't know what the like, usually we do a payment fee once we get greenlit that goes into production. And then I give them a back end percentage. So I usually do the payment fee based on the budget. I say, look, I'll give you 10% of what the budget is or what the market will bear as your upfront fee. I'll give you 10% of that as soon as you sign the life rights chain of title, because technically when you go pitch, you're not even really supposed to pitch things unless you're doing the unauthorized version without their consent. So the first thing we get is the chain of title, which is your life rights agreement with the talent. And we go out and source that. And instead of saying we're going to pay you $100,000 or $200,000, we say, look, we'll pay you 10% of whatever the budget is, and no one single line item or person or individual in the film will get paid more than you. And then I usually offer 50% of the back end, because back end, if you finance it through Canada, worst case scenario, you can mitigate 60% of the budget, 55, 60. Best case scenario, you can mitigate 85 to 100. The back end is actually substantial compared to a lot of films where marketing costs and everything exhaust that completely and there's no money to be made. So then obviously all of the talent has, like, when you're dealing with factual, like, there's only so much creative control you can have. You tell them how stylistically you want to shoot it, and you work with them on, hey, here's our proposed interview list. Like, sure, this is the one that was in the pitch deck. That was the flash to get the cash. But now who actually needs to be in here that really knows you and is a pivotal piece to your story? And then we kind of hone in on, are there those perfect ones where, like, okay, they're a big name celebrity or talent or athlete, but they also really know the story. We make sure we have all of them lined up and then try to work on that list. But that's how the talent always feels comfortable, is like, even from the get-go, the interview list is approved by them, right? Like, this is who we're going to go for. Are these the people? Who can you help us with? Who should we reach out to directly? Right. So then they're like, oh, well, you're giving me so, like, already, like, especially when we deal with a lot of the American talent, because they're not used to that. They're like, wow, you guys are just so transparent, like, show us budgets and you go through everything. So that way, when they have the back end incentive, and then I always give them 50% of the back, so that if they're just about money, that I would say stay away from most talent, because most of the talent we work with, sure, they want money, but they want the money more to show that we're real, right? Like, most of the people we're going to, like, Danny didn't need money. Right? Bisbing didn't need the money. In fact, I had to bug Bisbing to be like, hey, send me your next invoice. I'm going to get you paid. He's like, yeah, we'll figure that out. I'm like, no, please, just for accounting, it'd be easier for me if you could just do that. Right.
Yeah.
So, like, really, for most of the talent, it's about, they really want their story told correctly. Mm-hmm. So the money is just to show that you're real and you're not a, bullshit Hollywood producer that's going to try to screw them over. And then in the life rights agreements and stuff, they'll have things like, reasonable consultation, and they're allowed to change 2 or 3 things. And then this is where you put safeguards for you, is you say, okay, no problem. You can have those things, but you have to give us those notes within 5 days. Right. So that, that way they're not like hanging on to it for 2 months and slowing down your production and screwing you over. Right. So it can actually work in your favor. And we've never really had complications. Like, Bisbing was one of the biggest ones where we had a lot of creative choices that just didn't connect with him. And he's like, and not in a bad way. It's just like, I'm not digging it. I'm not digging this music. I'm not digging that. But at the end of the day, you're talking about a real life story. Like, as much as we want to bring a creative element to it, or a director has a vision, it's based on a true story. So, that's what I'd even have to walk my director off the ledge at times, right? When he's like, man, this is ruining my vision. I was like, but it's his real life, yes. Right? So, like, and he's saying it's not connecting. So it's cool. You had some cool things. They didn't jive. And the cool part is the director and I are great friends. Michael Hamilton, he's very talented. And after we did the final cut and everybody loved it and Bisbing was happy and we did the sound mix, he actually thanked me, said, Adam, like, you know what? I was hung up on some of my ideas, but watching it all flushed out now, I actually like the film way better. Right. So the talent normally, I mean, look, if they're really seeming difficult in the negotiating their life rights about every little thing, probably a good idea just not to do it. Right. Because they have to trust you at some point that you're going to tell the story. Like, and again, it's factual, so you can't get everything. It's like, here's who we propose to interview. Here are some key, like, what's coming up in the next 18 months of your life. You're going to do this, you're going to do this, you're going to do the Hall of Fame or whatever. We want to cover those. And these are the story arcs and the elements that we've approved with you. Then it usually kind of hones in from there. Danny was the easiest. Like, once we showed him, he stood up with tears in his eyes and he's like, I am Danny Trejo and I approve of this movie. It was great because we made sure his agents and everybody were in there. So then the agents, like, because they tried to throw in all this bullshit, like, agent stuff, marketing stuff. Well, we need more Trejo's tacos and we need more of this stuff in there. And we're like, No, that doesn't cover Danny's story. So when him doing that, if I can put a suggestion, what we always do is that the talent and the director have final say. Because then even if sometimes an overbearing agent or a manager comes in, if the talent sends you an email and says, don't you fucking change it, right? And then the director loves it, then you can just send that to the agent and say, well, no, your talent wants it this way. So
perfect. Done deal, right?
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, I'm going to pause you there, Adam. We'll come back. I'm going to ask Bill Evans now to come on the screen. It's time for the much anticipated draw. Hi, Bill.
Hello, hello.
All right, let's see.
Got
Winner.
all the names in a bowl. Gonna mix them all up. And the winner is
drum roll.
Braden Rook. Yay, Braden.
Woohoo!
Yay, Braden.
Braden. Awesome.
So we'll contact you afterwards, Braden. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Bill. All right. For those of you that have to leave us at 1 o'clock, thank you so much for joining us. And for those of you that want to stick around, we'll get to a few more questions, because if you're like me, this is just it's mind blowing. And it's like, there's not enough time. So we're going to bring back Adam on screen, and I'm just going to go through a few more questions if we can.
Sure.
All right. Okay. So the next one, I want to get to all the viewer ones here. So there's one that says, here we go. Have you created sizzles or teasers to pitch any of the documentaries that you've produced? If so, was it beneficial with securing interest and funding?
Yes, absolutely. Then that's a kind of a chicken and egg thing, right? If you have the ability and someone's easy to get access to or local and you can shoot a lot of it and you have your own gear and you're a great editor, by all means, like sizzle reels, the more you can have to pitch your idea, the better, right? But just kind of the problem that happens there, and something that my team and I have really tried to sharpen in on in the last couple of years is because this is a business, and that you can get caught up in development really quick of a lot of projects, right? And you can eat through, $5, $10, $20, $30, $40,000 like that if you're out shooting and doing stuff. So I usually like to have development in place before I shoot anything. But sometimes if there's enough online, and, I work very closely with some great editors and stuff now where, they don't mind doing favors because I've thrown them so much work where I'm like, look, could you put together here? And we have the logo and the identity. The more you can have, the more you have to pitch who you're trying to get, funding from, the better. I did it with Ice Guardians. I did it with many others, but I try not to spend, especially if I'm, I try not to lean on my team for a lot of favors unless we have to. So it's, again, if you own your own stuff and you can shoot it and it's only some travel costs, never hurts to have sizzle reels. Doesn't hurt, but just, making sure you don't do that for 3 or 4 projects and then they don't get picked up and you're in the hole for 30 grand in development can, crush your company pretty quickly.
Okay, awesome. Jay, yes, this recording will be available after this event. Matt will probably just throw in the comment section where you can find this recording. Okay, let's go to Tom Acton's question. Is selling to a streaming service profitable in your experience? What kind of deals happen there? Ultimately, what is the top target for sales?
Whew, that's interesting because I'm constantly learning there. So Netflix is a really, really tough nut to crack these days. Like, I don't know what they're looking for. They have an algorithm program that picks everything, and they do something that's pretty clever, but also a pain in the butt. Is like they really try to eliminate buddy system, right? Or anybody that you've worked with. So you get to know someone that's in documentaries, and then by the time you're ready to deliver your documentaries, they're like, oh no, I do Christmas movies now. So you have to talk to this person. So then you're like, starting from scratch, you have to charm the gatekeeper and go all through this again. So streaming services, but I think your question is geared to make money. Is there more off of something like Amazon? And it's so weird because there's so much content online. So if you don't have marketing behind it, it's hard for it to really break through the surface and get noticed. Although there was one, right now all our hockey docs, or we just got them on Amazon Prime after, like, Ice Guardians have been on Netflix for 3.5 years. Now it's on Amazon Prime. Making Coco is on there along with, it's on Super Channel and other places. And those ones are doing really well. Like, especially Tough Guy, the Bob Probert one is like killing on there. Like, it's done incredible numbers that I'm just like, it's hard to understand how it's doing so well. And Ice Guardians doing very well too. So you can, but again, it's usually things that have a built-in audience already. Like Bob King is the king of Tough Guys. And, if you have your Wayne Gretzky of Tough Guys, it's Bob Probert, right? So you've got a built-in audience with something like that. There's no, who we're looking to go for now, if you're going for like the the big broadcaster, like Bell is your king to go to in Canada. They have one of the Bell and CBC. They have, the biggest broadcast licenses and CMF envelopes, which the CMF envelope in Canada is the big tick. That's better than even the broadcast license if you can get it. But it's hard to get. They have the biggest envelopes. So other streamers, I haven't really done. Like I had a few Netflix deals, and now they don't really seem to like to buy anything. Like I go to them always because I'm still looking for that Netflix original, but they pass on me all the time. Like and they're never Netflix, because they're the big dog. They usually like to be like, yeah, we'll get it later when it does really well. They know that you'll wind up with them now. I'm interested to see how that's going to change over the next couple of years, like Peacock and HBO Go and all these different things coming together. So there isn't a right answer here. Like, I mean, always in Canada, I always go to Super Channel and Bell. Super Channel, I wouldn't have a career if it wasn't without them. So I always go to Super Channel first and kind of give them first right of refusal. And if it's not for them, then I'll try Bell. And then if I can't get it out of Canada, then, maybe E1 and stuff. The thing I don't like about E1 is E1 doesn't just, because I noticed that in the question, they don't just tie up your broadcasting license. They take everything in Canada, right? So, yeah, I wish I had a better answer for that. I'm still learning like you. I don't know. I've never got the Amazon deal. I've never got the Hulu deal. I've never got the Netflix original deals either. I've always financed everything out of Canada and then sold it later. So I'm still learning on the streaming services myself, but there are definitely some films that can make money on there. And then there's other ones that go on there to die, essentially.
All right. Okay. And we've got, is that a question? How do you know when to start and stop filming when doing a doc? David.
Right. Well, I don't start until we're funded, because you lose money typically if you go. Maybe if everything's in line and you're just waiting for the funding programs to come through, because the CMF doesn't open until May, and then the closing window is until September, the 2 intakes for the regional bonus. I don't start until we're funded, just because I've just too many times where you've dumped development money in, and then distributor or broadcaster like, yeah, and then it doesn't happen or things change. So I don't go until we're funded. I'm very, for a guy that never had his paperwork and stuff organized in high school and could barely get into class on time, I don't move until all my stuff is so tight now, like, because I've learned the hard way every time. Like, I don't start working with the talent until their life rights are signed. I don't start filming until our financing is 100% in place. We just had that with a new series that we're starting on called Thunder, all about the life of Arturo Gatti and his mysterious death, I should say. That we don't, like, until literally we had our signed letter from the Minister of Alberta for the new FTTC, we didn't move. We had the CMF money in the bank account, didn't touch it. We had everything else lined up, private investors. I didn't ink any, I would have sent it all back because we wanted to wait till the provincial government said, yep, you've been approved for your tax credit. You can now go finance that and go. So I don't start filming till everything is completely in a row. And this is a good thing about when you apply to the CMF or to the tax credits. They make you have your director's agreement in place. They make you have your writer's agreement in place. They want to see your chain of title. They want to see your development history. They want to see all the stuff that you're going to need when you have to do your E&O and your legal and your deliverables. So I don't go until then. When we finish shooting the doc, that's a tougher question, because we've gone way longer in our production schedules and we've gone way over budget. And again, we keep doing a constant analysis of like, okay, how much are we spending? So for Bisbing, he got announced that he was going to be in the Hall of Fame, and the UFC let us know, and we were able to come to London and film when they surprised him on the big screen that he was getting inducted to the Hall of Fame. And then we wanted to wait till he actually went and did the ceremony where they gave us full access and we're behind the things and he's joking with us. And so that was like, well, that's not till July. And we're like, well, we were hoping to be wrapped by, December. So with docs, that's the one thing, is I always put a really long schedule. When I'm talking to talent, I usually say, look, I'm going to be in your life for probably 2 years, because from the time of concept to delivery, it's about a 2-year process, right? Like ideally you get all your filming done in 6 to 8 months. I haven't had that happen other than making Coco, I think, and Bailey. They both were really quick and we got them. But for the bigger docs, if something comes up, that's just we're negotiating with a pretty big comedian right now, and he's planning a big comeback, and we're kind of like, hey, if you're going to go sell out Madison Square Garden, like we want to be there for that. So if that's 8 months down the road, we will change our production schedule, and I will call and I will get all the changes to the CMF and everything needed. So stopping is a bit tough. Normally we stop when the director's like, I've got it. I can do it. I can deliver. We've got the full story. We're ready.
Amazing. Okay, final question, because it's so fitting for the times. How are you feeling about COVID, and do you incorporate it as a line item with travel, etc.?
Absolutely. And we've had to travel during COVID a couple of times. So the one we're working on currently with the Rocks company, Breaking Olympia, the Olympia was originally this, historic event of no other Olympian, especially not as decorated as Phil, had ever come back after a 2-year hiatus with the injuries he had. He had massive hernia problems and had all this mesh and stuff. And the first time he had it, he ripped them all apart because he was working out so hard, and he had to have them redone. And when your body is what you get judged on, right? It's the most, judgmental athletic sport in the world, because you're solely judged on what you look like. It's not like any other athlete where you go perform and then you can go drink beers and have a meal afterwards. No, they have to not have beers and only drink water and eat fish for 6 months, right? So originally the Olympia, he was supposed to compete in September, but then the Olympia got moved because of all of COVID stuff. So then it got moved to December. And then originally it was supposed to be in Vegas, and then it got moved to Florida because Vegas wouldn't allow crowds and everything. So we flew down. We haven't budgeted for this, but I told $7. I'm like, guys, there's going to be overages for COVID, because now we all have to get rapid tests. Before the recent changes, we all had to get rapid tests as soon as we arrived before we met any athlete. Then we had to get rapid tests anytime that we left a state. And then, we all stayed in Airbnbs, and we all got the N95s, and we sanitized and did everything we could to be as healthy, as safe as possible. And we did shoot the Olympia around 4,000 people in a big auditorium. And there was a big outbreak there and a whole bunch of athletes. And fortunately, none of us got it because we got tested on the way home. So with the recent travel restrictions that Canada just put, it's going to be much more difficult. So I'd look at getting exemption letters if you have to go outside of the country. You can get them. And this is also something that we found with our lawyer. It's pretty handy. Is if you have funding from the Canadian government, you're not lying when your exemption setter saying that you're a government employed media person and that your budgets were funded by the government. So you have to go travel in order to stay on site and to continue to spend the government's money appropriately. So that has gotten us across. We haven't traveled recently. We've been pushing back some dates because of the recent travel ban, just because it seems like it's going to be more difficult. But we fortunately have been. So we also all got COVID officer certified. So everybody on our set knows all the basic compliance things. It was a really boring course that took 2 hours. Pretty much as straightforward, but once you're done, then you get a certificate that says you're COVID officer certified. So we had everybody on our set, our director, because we're a documentary and you do many things. We all got that done. So yeah, it's going to be a major problem for the next couple of years, I think, traveling. But like any good producer, if you do your research and you get the paperwork, you still should be able to, get it done and be able to get what you need.
Adam, oh my gosh, we can't thank you enough for your time today. Honestly, I can just tell all the attendees we're so grateful for your insight, your honesty. You put it all out there, and we're so grateful for that. So thank you so much.
You're very welcome. I said when I was starting this industry, I'd worked with producers that didn't do that, and that was going to be my goal, to change that culture in the industry. So I'm happy to hear that people are receptive to that and keep enjoying it, and I'll keep doing it. And I guess I'll just piss off the old school producers who don't like that.
Yes. Thank you so much. And to all of our attendees, thank you so much for joining us. And just a quick reminder, if you're not an AMPIA member, now is absolutely the time to do so, because we'll have a lot more of these events throughout the year. Thank you so much for joining us, and hopefully we'll see you again next time.